72 hours. That's all it took for $2.3 billion to disappear. Hedge funds panicked, banks froze, and somewhere in the middle of it, a man who started selling wiper blades in Malaysia had just brought Wall Street to its knees. This is the unforgettable rise and collapse of First Brands, the $10 billion auto scam hiding in plain sight. 1964. Patrick James is born to a Catholic family of Indian descent in Kuala Lumpur. By his teenage years, he's running a disco equipment business out of Petaling Jaya, supplying lights, sound systems, DJs for corporate parties. The 1980s arrive and Patrick lands at the College of Wooster in Ohio. Not Harvard, not Yale, a small liberal arts school buried deep in America's Rust Belt. His 1984 yearbook entry describes him as a frank and simple guy. He graduates, gets into mergers and acquisitions, spends the 1990s and 2000s buying dying metalworking plants through companies with names like Viking Industries and Hawthorne Manufacturing. Court documents later reveal Patrick's companies often did business with each other. He paid himself lucrative and substantial management fees from multiple ventures simultaneously. The pattern was already forming. Buy companies with borrowed money, use those companies as collateral damage to borrow more money, keep cycling, keep growing. Well, over a decade before First Brands imploded, Patrick was already battling creditors in court. In 2011, Fortress Investment Group sued several of his companies, claiming they share employees and management, do not have separate books and records, have the same address in Salon, Ohio, and are grossly undercapitalized. Translation: they were shell companies designed to obscure who controlled what. Of course, Patrick denied everything. He settled, moved on, and somehow, when he started building First Brands, lenders lined up anyway. Patrick's Crown Group acquires Trico Products in 2014, a Missouri-based windshield wiper manufacturer. Not sexy, not tech, just windshield wipers. But it's the first domino in an acquisition spree that would eventually span continents. By 2020, Crown Group rebrands as First Brands Group. The portfolio becomes absurd. Raybestos brakes, Fram oil filters, Autolite spark plugs, Cardone engine parts, Trico wipers, Anco wipers, licensed Michelin wipers. Revenue explodes from $1 billion in 2020 to $5 billion in 2024. 26,000 employees across 5 continents, over 2,900 active patents. Nobody realized Patrick was burning companies way too fast, and it didn't make any financial sense. By 2020 and 2024, he bought 24 brands funded almost entirely with debt, except the debt structure was creative. Asset-backed loans, second lien loans, standard stuff. Around $8 billion worth. There were the shadow facilities as well, another $2.3 billion in manufacturing facilities alone, plus $682 million in additional supply chain financing. Add it together, and you get over $10 billion in total liabilities, against assets valued somewhere between $1 billion and $10 billion. Nobody noticed the bomb ticking underneath. Well, almost nobody. Enter Rystone. This is a fintech platform founded in 2019 by David Skurzensky. His previous job? One of the first employees at Greensill Capital. Yeah, that name should ring alarm bells. There's a long story about Lex Greensill, who had allegedly inflated invoice values, financed invoices that might never be paid. The point is, David Skurzensky watched it all from the inside, saw how it worked, learned the playbook. Then he founded Rystone and built a business model that looked eerily familiar. Connect companies needing cash with investors wanting high yields. Don't take the risk yourself, just facilitate. Take a fee, move on. Except with First Brands, Rystone didn't move on. By 2025, First Brands represented between 70 and 80% of Rystone's entire revenue. The whole company had effectively become a Patrick James subsidiary, and the investors pouring money into these arrangements: UBS, Jefferies, Millennium, Japan's Mitsui, Norinchukin Bank. The yields were incredible though. Some short-term facilities offered 30% annual interest in a world where savings accounts paid 4% and treasury bonds paid 5%. Investors saw 30% returns and their skepticism evaporated. Summer 2025. Cracks appear. Suppliers aren't getting paid, not occasionally, constantly. By February, 57% of First Brands bills are over 90 days past due. By June, it's still hovering near 50%. Investors start asking questions. Can we see the invoices backing these loans? Can we verify the receivables actually exist? Patrick James stops showing his face on Zoom calls. His brother Edward, who runs the Working Capital Solutions division, allegedly becomes hostile when anyone asks for documentation. In August, Patrick tries to refinance $6 billion in debt. The potential lenders, the ones about to hand over billions, ask for something called a quality of earnings report. Basically, prove your numbers are real. Patrick agrees. The deal pauses, everyone waits. And the longer they wait, the more nervous everyone becomes. September 15th, First Brands stops directing payments to Point Bonita Capital, a Jefferies-managed fund that had purchased $715 million in First Brands receivables. Just stops. No explanation, no warning. After 6 years of consistent payments, the money simply vanishes. Jefferies' Point Bonita Capital Fund, which manages $3 billion in trade finance assets, suddenly has nearly a quarter of its entire portfolio frozen. Within days, Patrick loans are trading at 32 cents on the dollar. There was a 68% chance investors will never see their money again. September 25th, Carnaby Capital Holdings, one of Patrick's financing vehicles, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. September 27th, South State Bank, clearly seeing the end game, seizes $27 million from First Brands accounts, every dollar of remaining U.S. liquidity. First Brands now has $14 million in cash, payroll is due in days, suppliers are threatening to shut off deliveries. A group of panicked lenders provides a $24.5 million emergency bridge loan, not out of generosity, because they need First Brands to survive long enough to file bankruptcy orderly. Otherwise, it's complete chaos. September 28th, First Brands Group files Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Liabilities disclosed between $10 billion and $50 billion. The range alone is terrifying. Come on, how does a company not know its own debt within a $40 billion margin of error? The same day, they secure $1.1 billion in debtor-in-possession financing with $500 million available immediately, and then the real bombshells start dropping. October 9th, 2025, Rystone files an emergency court motion that stops Wall Street cold. They're calling for an independent investigation into $2.3 billion tied to First Brands that had simply vanished. Not lost, not misplaced, vanished. Rystone claims First Brands was double pledging, using the same invoices as collateral for multiple loans. Let me simplify it for you. Invoice shows Walmart owes you $100 million, borrow $80 million from investor A using that invoice as collateral, then turn around and borrow another $80 million from investor B using the same invoice. When Walmart finally pays that $100 million, someone's not getting their money back. If proven, this is fraud, wire fraud, securities fraud. The Department of Justice opens a criminal investigation. Court documents reveal that 11 of First Brands' 30 largest unsecured creditors hold claims related to supply chain finance. The 6 highest claims all supply chain finance. Just a day earlier, on October 8th, UBS announces over $500 million in exposure through its O'Connor hedge fund unit. The fund had invested heavily in invoice-backed debt links to First Brands through Rystone. Technically, the O'Connor Fund avoided breaching its 20% single position limit by splitting exposure across First Brands' various customers. On paper, they were diversified. In reality, it was all First Brands. I mean, the timing couldn't be worse. Nobody wants to buy a fund that just lost $500 million. October 13th, Patrick James resigns as CEO. His brother Edward had already stepped down days earlier. Charles Moore, a restructuring expert who led Detroit's bankruptcy, steps in as interim CEO. The story gets truly terrifying when you realize it's not the fact of the $10 billion, it's not even Patrick James or Rystone or the vanished money, it's the market they were playing in. Yes, private credit, lending by institutions other than banks, has exploded. In 2020, the market was around $1 trillion. By early 2024, it hit $1.5 trillion. Projections for 2029 range from $2.6 trillion to $5 trillion. That's the size of entire national economies. After 2008, banking regulations made it harder for traditional banks to lend, so the money moved to the shadows. Private equity firms, hedge funds, credit funds, asset managers. Private credit promised flexibility without the regulatory burden, and it worked. until First Brands proved it didn't. When banks make loans, regulators examine them, stress test them, demand capital reserves, force disclosure. The system isn't perfect, but there's oversight. It's called private for a reason. No reporting requirements, no stress tests, just money flowing in the dark until something explodes. In December 2022, the Financial Accounting Standards Board introduced reforms after regulators saw, post-Greensill, that companies were literally hiding billions off their balance sheets. First Brands complied, they disclosed, and it meant nothing. That's because the rules don't require companies to reclassify trade payables, consolidate off-balance sheet vehicles, or show which invoices are tied to which lenders. You can follow every rule and still hide billions in debt. Patrick James proved it. But wait, there's another layer to this disaster that nobody's talking about. Tariffs. First Brand estimated that U.S. import tariffs cost them $219 million between April and August 2025. 5 months, $219 million gone. The annual interest burden alone, $900 million on $5 billion in revenue, meant nearly 20% of every dollar earned went straight to interest before a single employee got paid, before a single part got manufactured, before a single truck left the warehouse. Add tariffs, add suppliers cutting you off, add investors demanding documentation you can't provide, the death spiral accelerates beyond control. First Brands is selling itself into bankruptcy. The court approved a sale process. Whoever buys the assets gets the brands, the factories, the customers, but not the debt. That stays with Patrick's entities. Jefferies is fighting to recover its $715 million. UBS is trying to salvage something from its $500 million hole. Rystone is dead. Patrick James has disappeared from public view. Let me ask you a broader question. How many more First Brands are out there? Every major investment bank is looking at their private credit exposure and asking this same question. How many other companies are using similar structures right now, waiting for the music to stop? Private credit boomed because it offered higher returns with seemingly lower risk. Companies that couldn't access public markets found willing lenders in the shadows. Those lenders made attractive returns. Everyone was happy, until someone realized that nobody was actually checking whether the collateral existed, whether the invoices were real, whether the same assets were being pledged multiple times. When assets aren't marked to market regularly, problems appear as surprises rather than gradual adjustments. And lack of transparency about concentration means knockoff effects nobody anticipated. The 1998 collapse of long-term capital management required a $3.6 billion bailout. The 2007 subprime crisis destroyed Lehman Brothers. Both followed the same pattern. Is First Brands the next domino, or is it the canary in the coal mine warning of something much larger? What do you think? Drop your opinion in the comments below, and if this story intrigued you, wait until you hear about this one. Click here to watch the story now.